Hello and welcome back. It is Monday. I am Mr. Sisotris, and this week I'm going to be doing the It's Finally Fall tag. I know fall started last week, but this is the week that actually kind of feels like fall. The leaves are actually starting to change and it's getting cooler, and so I figured this is a better time to do it anyways, especially as we're heading into October next week, which is crazy. Oh wait, it's Monday. I'm filming this before Monday, so there's some time travel happening here. But yeah, so when this is airing, it'll be the last day of September, and then, whatever. Anyways, moving on. The prompts for this one are as follows. We're going to start with number one. So the first one says, in fall, the air is crisp and clear. Name a book with a vivid setting. For that one, I chose The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Actually, the entire Daevabad trilogy. The setting in this is just gorgeous. You really feel like you're there, the smells, the sights, the sounds. It feels like a living, breathing city, and the characters and their dress and the music and everything in it. It's vivid. It's just a place that feels so real, and it's definitely one that I would love to visit if it were possible. So definitely Daevabad wins for descriptive settings. The next prompt says, nature is beautiful but also dying. Name a book that is beautifully written but also deals with a heavy topic. For that one, I had to go with Carson McCullers' The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. This book is absolutely gorgeous. It is also one of the saddest books I have ever read. Oh my goodness. Feelings of disconnection, of feeling like your life isn't going where it's supposed to. There's one character whose whole story is all about feeling lonely and unappreciated and disconnected from those around him. And this book is just incredible. It is so well written. It feels very modern. It was published in, I think, 1940, but this book is just incredible. Just a beautiful portrait of sort of the South and kind of the small towns, but not in an idyllic way. This is sort of, and it's not in a sinister way either. There's usually kind of two ways you see small towns depicted in literature. They're either idyllic and perfect and kind of you look back at them fondly, or there's something very creepy going on. The people there are dangerous, they're hiding a dark secret, something like that. This one is just more like just sort of the reality of sort of living in a small town and having people around you but not having any really meaningful connections, and the feeling of loneliness that can kind of cause. Would highly recommend this. I know I keep saying it's sad and it will rip your heart out, but it's really incredibly written. This one fits into the Southern Gothic sort of genre, and that's Gothic not in the sense of like spooky and ominous. It's Gothic in the sense of the loss of connection to the previous world and feeling kind of adrift and kind of unusual characters, and they're all sort of stuck in time. That's kind of a hallmark of Southern Gothic, is this kind of feeling of being stuck in time and unable to kind of move beyond that. So would highly recommend this. I love this book so much. All right, the third prompt is, fall is back to school season. Share a nonfiction book that taught you something new. And for this one, I have to go with True Reconciliation by Jody Wilson-Raybould. This was very eye-opening. I really, really enjoyed this one. There's an entire middle section, and it's kind of highlighted by the gray pages, that sort of is like an oral history of how the government of Canada sort of dealt with the Indigenous people that were there. Treaties, meetings, laws that were placed, that kind of stuff. And it really shows how there was all these promises made early on, and how those promises kind of kept getting broken over and over and over through time. But this was just a really fascinating read. It's something that people don't really talk about a lot. I know there's lots of talk about sort of how the Indigenous people were treated in the US, and you got the Trail of Tears and all that. But Canada is just as bad in that regard. And there's a lot of stuff in here that I think people need to know. It isn't sort of an accusatory, you're all angry and, we hate you kind of book. That's not it at all. This is definitely a book about fostering connections and encouraging empathy for the people whose land was taken away and who have been mistreated and kind of lied to by the government. And it's sort of, I don't know, this is a very kind of optimistic book. It's saying there's ways that we can forge connections, we can sort of right past mistakes and move forward and create sort of a better future. And that's one thing that I really, really appreciated about this. Very eye-opening. Definitely something I think students need to read, even if it's just like a basic, Canadian history class. This is definitely something. There's a lot of really important, essential stuff to sort of statecraft and nation building that is never talked about ever. So this is definitely something that more people should read. And even if you're not in Canada, it's always good to learn about sort of how other nations have treated Indigenous peoples, and you can learn about ways that you can be more empathetic to the Indigenous people of your own country. So would highly recommend this one. I really enjoyed it. All right, the next prompt says, in order to keep warm, it's good to spend some time with the people we love. Name a fictional family / household / friend group that you'd like to be a part of. And this was kind of a difficult one. I had to think about this one because I'm kind of a loner person. But I will say The City We Became and its sequel has just a eclectic, wonderful group of people at its heart, and they all sort of become this kind of found family of misfits and outsiders, and they all come together, and they all have their different strengths, they all have different powers, and it would just be so much fun to hang out with these people. I love this book. This is by N.K. Jemisin. It's a duology, would highly recommend it. It's sort of action adventure, fantasy, Lovecraftian. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just fun. Urban fantasy maybe is kind of the best description, but it's just a great duology full of wonderful, vibrant characters, and they're definitely a group that I'd love to spend time with, just because they're all so wacky and fun and interesting, and they play off each other really, really well. The next one says, the colorful leaves are piling up on the ground. Show us a pile of fall-colored spines. And so this is kind of a random group here. Here we go here. And so we've got Octavia Butler's first two books, The Parable of the Talents, Parable of the Sower. These are wonderful, would highly recommend them. They're brutal and, it's very bleak, but she also knew what she was talking about, because the stuff that she's discussing in terms of an apocalypse or an apocalyptic decline is definitely something that we need to talk about, and it feels very prescient right now. Next up on the list is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. This one I have not read yet. I really, really want to. I've heard it's sort of a classic, spooky, and it's very much kind of a template for many books that we see kind of later on. So would highly, I'm looking forward to reading this one. Next up is N.K. Jemisin's short story collection, How Long Till Black Future Month. This one is really, really good. There's some really incredible stories in here. One that really jumps out at me is sort of a response to, I think it's Ursula K. Le Guin's stories, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. I think that's what it's called, which is sort of a story that's set around sort of what if you could have a idyllic, perfect utopian society, but it was only possible at the expense of the suffering of a child who's kind of sacrificed to the needs of the city every so often. And so she has a response to that, and it's called, I think, The Ones That Stay and Fight, I believe. And it's slightly different. It's not like a sequel to that story or anything. It's slightly different, but it's the same kind of situation, and it's kind of setting up sort of what happens to there's people who can walk away from a bad nation and leave, but then there's also the ones who stay and say, no, we're going to change the regime, we're going to change the way this thing is. And thought-provoking, really incredible. Next up is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the second book in his Angel Lake trilogy. I'm going to be reading all three of these books for October. I just started the first one, My Heart is a Chainsaw, and I'm really excited to get to this one. The last one on this list also feels kind of, I don't know, fall-ish, and that is the Diana Gabaldon short story collection, Seven Stones to Stand or Fall. This is a collection in her Outlander kind of universe, and it's short stories and novellas that cover sort of a long span of time, many different characters, many different perspectives. There's really good stuff in here. There's a short story called A Leaf on the Wind of All Hallows. That's great. There's also another kind of fall themed, spooky-ish kind of story. But they're all just really great character stories, and they give a lot of insight into the main Outlander series. There's a Lord John short story in here as well. Good stuff. If you're a big fan of the Outlander series, this is definitely one you don't want to miss. So this is my fall color stack, and they're all kind of fall themed. You know, not really, but they kind of are. All right, the next prompt says, fall is the perfect time for some storytelling by the fireside. Share a book wherein someone is telling a story. So for that one, I chose Life of Pi by Yann Martel. In this one, the main character is telling the story to someone who's kind of interviewing him. I think it's set up as though like the person he's telling the story to is Yann Martel himself, who's writing a story. So it's very kind of, you know, truth is stranger than fiction kind of thing. But what I love about this one is the story is very fantastical. It's rooted in kind of the real life, but it just has sort of outlandish fantasy elements. And so the whole time you're not really sure if the story you're being told is true or not. And at the very, very end, there's sort of this suggestion that it might be true, but it also might not be. But the story that is embellished a bit is the story that kind of has the more profound effect on the reader, whereas the real life story, if that's what happened, is something that would kind of cause you to lose faith in humanity, because it would be very bleak. But the book never really says if, you know, what's true or not. It's sort of up to you to decide, you know, did he have all these adventures, or was he making it all up? But if he was making it all up, is the value of that story not still important? So I really, really, really love this book. It's one of my favorites. The audiobook is also really incredible, and I love the movie. The movie is so good. So yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite, you know, books where, you know, someone's telling someone else's story. So definitely would recommend this one. The next prompt says, the nights are getting darker, share a dark, creepy read. For that one, I have to go with The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the first book of his that I read, and it just drew me right in. He's definitely a reader that I want to read more of. Like I said earlier, oh, there's a cat here. I'm going to be reading his Angel Lake trilogy this upcoming month. But this is just, it's a really effective, creepy story. I don't even want to give too much away about it because it kind of ruins the surprise, but it's just, there's something in the woods that may or may not be hunting various people, and you find out sort of why. It has to do with sort of possibly a mistake that someone made. It has a really great final girl in it, and it's got, I think people are critical of the ending because they feel like it seems a little goofy. I didn't find it goofy. I found that it sort of fit the characters really well, because so much of it is like in people's heads. You're not really sure what's real or not, and I thought this was really effective. I really personally really enjoyed this one. His writing style is great. He has this sort of charming, amiable prose, and then something horrific will happen, and you're like completely caught off guard, because like you're like, oh, I really like these characters, and then they start doing horrible things, and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. I love his writing style. Can't wait to read more of his work. The next prompt says, the days are getting colder. Name a short, heartwarming read that could warm up somebody's cold and rainy day. And this one's probably cheesy, but I'm gonna go with The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien. This book is a favorite for a reason. It's so good. It's cozy. It's wonderful. It does have darker elements here and there, but it ends up sort of where it started. So the characters change and grow. For something that's like a children's book, I think this has a great deal of nuance and depth. Tolkien was so good at getting at the heart of like what makes people tick, and this really wrestles with some heavy subjects, but it's just wonderful. I love it. I love the writing style. Please read The Hobbit if you haven't. Even if you don't plan on reading Lord of the Rings, if you find it, tedious and long, which it really isn't compared to many other fantasy series. The Lord of the Rings is pretty much perfect. But if it's not your jam, that's fine. You don't have to read it. But definitely give The Hobbit a try, because this book is a classic for a reason. It's wonderful. I love it. All right, the next prompt is, fall returns every year. Name an old favorite that you'd like to return to soon. And for that one, I chose The Call of the Wild by Jack London. This edition also has White Fang in it. But The Call of the Wild is one of those books. I read it a million times when I was a kid. I absolutely loved it. If you haven't read it, it's kind of an adventure novel, but it's told from the point of view of a dog named Buck. And it's just sort of him surviving in the Arctic wilderness, dealing with people, and it's just great. Just, I don't know, I remember just really, really loving it, because what kid doesn't like dream about, it's like, what if I was an animal and I didn't have to deal with like going to school or having naps, and I could just be a dog and just run around in the wilderness. That just really appealed to me, even though naps are amazing. I don't know what young me was thinking, but this is definitely a book that I would love to read as an adult, and revisit it, because I feel like there's a lot in there that I either missed, or there's just the language of the prose, the beauty of the prose. He was a very elegant, minimalist sort of writer, and I feel like that's something I can appreciate now as an adult. So this is definitely one that I want to revisit, because I remember loving it so much. I'm a little intimidated at times because I don't want to read it now and think, oh, well, this isn't really as good as I thought. But I feel like this is one that I'm pretty confident is going to be really excellent. So I do want to read this one eventually. I think I might try to read this during the winter. This feels like a winter read. And the final prompt says, fall is the perfect season for cozy reading nights. Share your favorite reading accessories. And I don't really have a lot of like reading accessories, except for maybe my e-readers. But I will say one very important reading accessory would be the cat. There are two cats here, but the one is sort of the one who always accompanies me while reading. So this is her. You've heard her in every video, and I think I've shared a couple pictures of her here and there. But anyway, this is Circe. You're the host. No, she doesn't care. My other reading accessory that I have been using more and more recently, I would have to say, are my like reading playlists. Now, I know some people don't like to listen to music while they read, but I find that it just sort of sets the mood really well. And this is really cheesy, but I'll post links to them. You can follow them if you want, whatever. But there's two that I've been going back and forth with a lot recently. One is one that I made called Songs for Reading in a Gothic Castle, and these are instrumental, ominous, gothic, slightly spooky. They're perfect for reading like gothic novels, horror novels, even gothic romance. I don't know, it just adds a lot to the atmosphere, and I really like it. I usually turn the volume way down and just have it just in the background, but it's great. The other one that I've been enjoying recently is one that I made called Songs for Drinking Tea by the Lakeside. This is also gentle instrumental, piano and cello, that kind of stuff, and it's sort of just calm, chill vibes, good for cozy reads, romance, anything else. I don't know. You may not enjoy listening to music while you read, and that's fine. Everyone's different. But I like to have sort of mood music. Playlists are sort of my, I wouldn't say superpower, because that's really cheesy, but that's like my obsession. I have music for everything, music specifically for every scenario and situation. And so, yes, I definitely have music that I listen to while reading as well. So with that said, I will let you go. I will see you next week. And in the meantime, happy reading. Bye.